This guy's work diet is overwhelming. I don't know how many hours of sleep he's getting. Someday I'd love to do a podcast just going over what the work-life schedule looks like for this man, especially this time of year. But it's the insider, Elliotte Friedman of 32 Thoughts. I know you're doing a lot, so I'm not going to editorialize during this segment, and I'm going to try to keep my questions brief, and I'm going to try to get in as much as possible. Sound good?
That's fine. No problem.
Let's do this. Okay, number one. So there's a lot of teams waffling around that. They're fighting for those final playoff spots. The sellers are not. There's not a ton of them. The buyers are aggressive. Are you starting to get the sense that there's some teams having strong internal debates that maybe they are actually going to add to the sellers list as we approach the 24 hours here?
Well, I think that's basically changing on a day-to-day basis, JD. Like one of the teams we've been watching, and particularly because they've been linked to Toronto with St. Louis, they won again last night. They're a point out of the playoffs. Their math is a little worse than everybody else's because they've played more games, but they're winning, and they looked pretty good last night in doing so. So I think we're all kind of sitting here. They've got Braden Shen, a player the Leafs have talked a lot about and have done a lot of thinking about. Are they actually going to move their captain when they're a point out of the playoffs at the trade deadline? I think that's something that we're all kind of sitting here wondering, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's a team that has players that interest teams, particularly the one in the market you're in, and they're close. I don't know if a month ago we would have expected it would be quite like this, but now here we are, and if anything, that could be making the price higher for sure.
I would just feel like there has to be really strong internal discussions when it comes to teams like other than St. Louis, but are in kind of similar spots where you don't know if you have a championship ceiling and you're looking at these prices and saying, my God, we could really recoup a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think the Islanders are another one. 4 points out, lots of teams between them. Like with the Islanders, I not only wonder about just the point difference, the fact they've got to jump over 5 teams to get in, right? So, and especially in the era of the loser point, it's a lot harder than it sounds. I agree with you. I think we're getting to the point where the Islanders realize they're probably not going to be able to re-sign Nelson right now. So does that increase the chances that they end up trading him? I also agree with you, JD, in the sense that you look at what Seattle got for their 2 players yesterday, they traded to Tampa. And I thought Julian Breezewald's statement was interesting, where he talked about I'd rather have good players than a bunch of picks. I think the thing that allows Julian Breezewald to say that is that he's in a destination market, right? Not everybody. It's bold, it's brash, it sounds excellent. I loved all the memes yesterday. I would say the same thing if I was him. But, if Tampa wasn't a destination, I don't think they could do that. I think they're fortunate that they live in a place that people want to play. They're in a state with no state tax. And to their credit, they've built an organization that players want to go to. And I think not everybody can approach the deadline like they do, but I mean, the prices are high. Like, I think Philly was really hoping for a first rounder or something comparable for Scott Laughton. Now I just don't think they do it for anything less.
So fan pressure is one thing, but what is your read on the internal pressure in Toronto right now? Because the front office structure is strange. There's guys with very different tenures. What is your read on how that stew is playing out and how much, pressure they feel within that circle?
I think there is pressure, absolutely. It's Toronto. It's MLSE. They want to do very well. There's a new boss in Keith Kelly who's been there for a year. I think you want to impress him. The tension is always high. There's always the desire, there's always the want, there's always the pressure to do better than you have before, right? And, I don't think that's any different this year. And I don't think you can always govern yourself by what people do around you, JD, but I think we're all being naive if we're saying it's not a factor. Like, a week ago, the East looked pretty wide open, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even when the Carolina got Rantanen, the question about whether or not he was going to end up staying, well, now I think it's basically 50-50 that he gets dealt. So, and all of a sudden we're sitting there. Florida's got Seth Jones and Vanacek, and I don't think they're done. And I think Rantanen, I think they're a team poking around Rantanen, although I'll say this, JD, it's hard to see what the match is. I'm very curious about what they could do in a Rantanen deal, but I do think he has potential interest long-term in there. I think that, you look at the deal Tampa made yesterday, I really like that trade for them. I think 1 to 12, they might have the best forward group in the East. And Vasilevsky looks like he's rediscovering himself. So, if you're the Maple Leafs, you can't always say, well, we have to answer, but it's hard not to look at what's going on around you, know that you're already, even before that happened, you were trying to upgrade the group and say, okay, like, this is concerning. What's going on around us.
Yeah, you're competing now with arguably the deepest forward group and the deepest defense core in Florida. So you look at this now, and we're talking about the pressure. There's been a lot of consternation about what kind of assets Toronto can use because it's a limited cupboard that they're dealing from. They have been aggressive in deadlines past. What is your sense in terms of their willingness to part with multiple major assets in a trade where you're not getting back perfect fits?
I think they're only doing that, JD, if they're really convinced it's the right thing. Now, I don't think that's impossible. I do think they're one of the teams that's talked to Carolina about Rantanen, and depending on what happens elsewhere around their roster, I think they would be very interested in Rantanen as a long-term piece. I think that's real, and I think for someone like him, they would probably be willing to do some things that are a little unique and different, but I'm just not sure what the likelihood of that is. I know they're in on it. I just would hesitate to handicap it.
Yeah.
Do I think that they would give up multiple pieces for the right thing? Yeah, I do think they would, but I think that thing would have to have term, and I think they would have to be convinced that it's the right thing for them. If Rantanen, like I said, I think they're in on Rantanen. I don't want to handicap it because it's fluid. And as we're on the phone right now, I'm getting notes saying, they might be in on this, they might be out on this. I have a saying, what's true today might not be true tomorrow. On a day like today, what's true now might not be true in 60 seconds. It changes that quickly.
Would you like to share those notes?
No, not yet. I got to check it. I'll say one of the things that I wrote last night was that I thought LA was big into Rantanen. I had people tell me later at night that it looked like LA was out. So I think things really change quickly and on this day, and you have to be able to pivot quick. One thing I'll say is that I think Toronto considered Rantanen, and they were full considering Shen, and I don't know what's going to happen there with St. Louis now. Like I said, people said to me it seemed less likely that they'd get Lawton, and I think Toronto's also in on Brock Nelson. I think that's another guy that they have some interest in, but it seemed less likely they were going to get Lawton. Now, does that mean they're out on Lawton? Does that mean they're not interested in Lawton, or does that mean they have higher targets than Lawton, and they might just circle back? All of this stuff could be true at different times, so you just have to sift through it.
So if we're doing the game of Rantanen or Brock Nelson, guys who do not have term, after an entire year of, hey, the Leafs would really like to add guys who have term to have some cost certainty moving forward, it would be hard not to make a bit of a leap and say, well, that tells you at least something about the confidence they feel in re-signing Mitch Marner. Is that an assumption, or God, I don't want to say assumption because you'll disagree with that, but is that your sense in this? If this team is going to be that aggressive for Rantanen, one of the names that you're listing in a small group of teams that are realistic for him, that it says anything about where they stand with Mitch Marner?
I just think with Marner, they don't know. Unless that's changed in the last 24 to 48 hours. I just think that right now, I don't know that there's an answer. Marner has indicated he'd like to play out the year. I don't think he's interested in getting traded. And again, JD, maybe that's changed in the last 24 hours, but it's been the case all year. He's not interested in getting traded. He just wants to play. And, and unless he's changed that stance, then I think the correct answer is they don't know. Now, his agent, Darren Ferris, everybody on this station, you've heard from Nick, you've heard from myself, you've heard from anybody who talks about it. His preference is to take his guys right to the market so they see what the option is. Now, the one thing that everybody should be aware about is it's not a 100% hard rule, although it's generally his philosophy. It's true in many cases. But if you take a look at it last night, one of his clients, although he wasn't the lead on it, Carol Vermelka just signed an extension with Utah. So there's a case where a player that he represents, although again I don't believe he was the lead agent on it, stayed where he was happy with and didn't go to free agency. Taylor Hall, and I know there's a lot of craziness floating around in Carolina right now as they deal with the Rantanen, but it's believed that Carolina and Taylor Hall would like to extend their relationship, and I believe Hall is willing. So. Like I said, I think in most cases that's his rule, and I believe that's been his stance with Marner so far. But there are situations where that can bend and change, and that's the way life is. Like we like to think it's black and white, but there's very often shades of gray.
Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time fixated on the forwards because it's been the most glaring need for this team throughout the regular season. But how aggressive do you see this team right now in the defenseman market? And are there names that you're starting to see really pick up with them?
I think that they've looked around. I think they poked around on Alexiak, although I was told that was very unlikely. So I think that's one guy that I think they've looked at or at least asked about, but I don't expect that to go anywhere. And so knowing that, I think that there's other defensemen that they're looking at for sure. I find it hard to believe they haven't explored that option, not only for performance reasons, but also for injury reasons. Tanev is out right now. That's a really good play Saturday. Meyer has actually played really well for them. And I actually think Connor Timmins is a guy who has performed much better than they expected. So I think they've been pleasantly impressed with both those players, but I still think they could be looking to upgrade.
How many roster players do you think are not with the Leafs 30 hours from now?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a possibility that a forward could go just to make it all work, money-wise. Like if you're, let's just say for argument's sake, you're doing Shen. Rantanen is different. Like he's a $2.3 million player if Carolina keeps 50%, right? So, I think that's a lot easier. But let's just say if argument's sake it's Shen, they would need some retention or a third party, and they might have to send a body out. So yes, I do think that's a possibility that one or two could be out.
Well, last one. Is Nick Robertson a Maple Leaf on Saturday?
It's a really good question. I'll say this, number one, he's not making a ton of money.
Yep.
And number two, he's played a lot better. To me, I think that, I don't think, I'm trying to answer this properly.
No, don't. Answer it just from your heart.
It's not even hard. It's just that, at this time of year, I'm always so careful about radioing myself.
No, don't do it. I promise you, whatever you say right now, won't put in a clip.
Yeah, but it's not. No, JD. It's not even on you. It's just it's the way it goes, right?
Yeah.
I don't put it this way. I don't think they need. I think they know overall that as long as if he doesn't feel like he's important, he's not going to be happy. But I think lately he's felt more important. You heard his quotes. I'm not demanding to be trading right now.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I don't think they feel that they have to do it or they're being pressured or pushed to do it. I think they realize that in the playoffs, one goal from someone who can score makes a huge difference, and he has tried to be better. But put it this way, if it comes down to a roster squeeze where someone has to go to make everything work in terms of fit, then I could see him possibly being moved. But I don't think they feel the pressure to do it from his camp like they did months ago.
I mean, that's a positive thing. If you you never want to feel like you have to do something. You had to do this hit.
If you go back to that game in New York last Friday, he had one shift where he made a really bad giveaway and ended up in their net, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't bench him or anything like that. Like it's the relationship has come a long way.
Elliotte, again, I don't know how you do it, but you did it, and you made time for me. I appreciate it. Thanks so much, and good luck with the next 30 hours.
No worries, JD. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.